I mean, just to make sure that the translators' lives are easier. In all cases, this session entitled Maternal Health and the Nutritional Status will bring together competitively selected oral presenters who will present their research, whether published or ongoing, on maternal health and nutrition in Jordan and Yemen. This session will bring together invited speakers from Utrech University and selected oral presenters from Jordan and Yemen to highlight evidence on breast milk composition, the importance of initiation and continuation of breastfeeding, and factors associated, as well as maternal health and nutrition status and its relationship to pregnancy outcomes and complications. With a big round of applause, please join me in welcoming Dr. Subhi Afnan Al-Ghanmi from Tufts University. تفضلي.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Thank you all for joining us, both in person and virtually. I'm very proud and pleased to present to you today the speakers that we have from around the globe. We actually have one speaker from Yemen joining us, another speaker from the Netherlands, and we have a couple of Jordanian speakers as well. This first oral session will be titled The Maternal Health and Nutritional Status, and I have the pleasure to moderate this session. I would gladly invite the speakers to join us on stage. Khadeejah Yousef from University of Jordan, Dr. Nahla Al-Bayyari from Huson University College, and Aseel Melhem from University of Jordan. If you can kindly join me on stage. And we have Dr. Kelly Dingess, joining us virtually, as well as Mr. Jarallah. So I'll be introducing the first invited speaker, Dr. Kelly Dingess. She is joining us virtually from she will be joining us virtually. Kelly is a senior scientist in human milk research and analytical sciences at Danone Nutritica Research. Her current focus on broad human milk research from prospective cohort trials to determine the human milk nutritional composition on maternal and infant health outcomes. Prior to her work at Danone Nutritica Research, Kelly completed her postdoc at Amsterdam Medical Center and her PhD at Utrech University, where she focused on human milk protein analysis with an emphasis on immunoglobulin A. This work transitioned into COVID-19 research to determine the antibody transfer from mother to infant after infection or vaccination. Kelly, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction. I just wanted to check that you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Perfect. Then I will start my presentation. Great. So you have the correct slides up, it looks like.
Yes.
Thank you for the introduction. So today I will be presenting work that I did during my PhD and my postdoc on human milk antibodies and COVID-19 protection. I would like to disclose, yes, I'm currently affiliated with Danone Nutrition Research. However, the research that I'm presenting today was not sponsored by Nutritia. And that the lead PI of these studies, Dr. Hans van Haltuver, is both the founder and the director of the Dutch Human Milk Bank in Amsterdam. And I would also like to thank all of the people who contributed to this work. This was all done as part of a very large COVID consortium project that across many different universities within the Netherlands, and it took a lot of people to get all of these results. So with that being said, I thought it would be a good idea to start by introducing you to the studies that were done here in the Netherlands. So actually we had 3 different COVID studies, and these really started with the COVID milk study early in the pandemic, where we were primarily focused on answering simple questions of, do we find back SARS-CoV-2 reactive antibodies in human milk from previously infected mothers? And because we were also interested in this from a milk banking perspective, we wanted to know, do different pasteurization methods, like traditional Holder pasteurization, which is the HOP that you see, versus more new alternative methods like high pressure pasteurization, which is the HPP. How do these methods affect the functionality of these antibodies? And then from there, we actually wanted to do an extended follow-up of these mothers that had positive PCR infections. And we wanted to see how long are these antibodies present in human milk, and then also what is the milk conversion rate in the Netherlands. And we were interested in this question about conversion rate because often for serilo conversion, this gives an indication of people in the population that have antibodies against a particular virus, and you can use that to determine, can you use this serum or plasma, or in our case milk, as a means of protection for vulnerable populations. So could we use this milk from infected mothers to protect, for instance, preterm infants who would otherwise not have any protection? And then because, of course, we're interested in the question of protection, we also then look at women that have been vaccinated against the virus, and what does this mean for antibody evolution in their milk as well? So then with that, I wanted to give a little bit of background because it's important to know how breast milk actually provides protection against infections. And this is usually done by 2 different mechanisms, either cellular mechanisms or non-cellular mechanisms. And there's a lot of information on this screen because there's a lot of different ways that this can happen. But today I'm primarily going to focus on secretory IgA, so SIgA. And these are the primary antibody in human milk. So because it is the primary antibody in human milk, this is why we were very interested in studying it, because it should be the primary means of protecting the infant against a virus or a pathogen that the mother encounters. So IgAs make up more than 90% of the immunoglobulin concentration in human milk. And it's also important to note that humans actually produce 2 different subclasses of IgA. They produce IgA1 and IgA2. Although today we're primarily talking about IgA1, and this is because it makes up the majority of this total IgA concentration. And when I say that IgA is the most dominant immunoglobulin in human milk, you can see from the numbers depicted here that IgAs typically make up 10 to 100 times more than any other antibody found back relative to their serum concentrations. So here, IgA in milk or serum, where serum is the first depicted number and milk is the second. Those numbers are about equivalent, but if you look at like IgG or IgM, those numbers are really in the milligram per liter range in human milk and in the gram per liter range in serum. So this is a big difference. So then it's also important to realize how these antibodies from the mother are able to stimulate an immune effect or pass immunity to the infant through human milk. And this is actually quite complex how the body does this, but in a very simple way, IgA is able to interact with microbes. These can be your commensal microbiome in the gut, for instance, or also more pathogens like viruses and bacteria and allergens that your body recognizes as being foreign. And it can do this at any mucosal surface within the body. And then what happens is that IgA interacts with something, it stimulates an immune response that produces more immune cells. This travels through the lymphatic system to the mammary gland. And then once at the side of the mammary gland, is transported across the mammary epithelium by another protein called polymeric immunoglobulin receptor, or PIGR. And I wanted to also bring up a little bit of terminology because I will talk about antibody clones throughout this presentation. And this is a term that people usually are unfamiliar with, but it's very simple. The human body produces trillions of different B cells. So this can be anything that your body just encountered. You have a B cell that makes an antibody that is specific to what it encountered. So each B cell produces a unique immunoglobulin. And each of these immunoglobulins are made up of heavy constant regions and variable regions. And you can see that depicted in panel A of this figure, where the variable region is designated as Fab and the heavy constant region is designated as FC. So what we were really interested in studying are these Fab regions, these variable regions, which are specific for every foreign epitope that they encounter and leads to an antigenic response. So this Fab region is what we call a unique antibody clone. And what we've done before in other non-COVID related studies is that we've seen that these secretory IgAs, if you look at their clonal profiles in human milk, they're actually relatively simple. So like I said, the human body can make trillions of different B cells, which should then translate to trillions of different antibody clones. But we actually see is that at any given time, the body is only making tens to thousands of different IgA clones. And also very interesting, no two individuals produce the same clone. So everybody has a unique antibody response to what they encounter. But also interesting, within one donor over time, it seems that these clonal profiles are rather simple and remain stable. So rather than having the clonal profile change, that profile stays the same clones are always present, but maybe they're just changing in concentration over time. So then with the COVID milk study, what we did was we actually looked at women who had a positive PCR test for SARS-CoV-2, and we investigated their human milk from varying assays like ELISA, neutralization-based assays, and mass spectrometry-based methods. And from these different assays, we were able to make many different conclusions from what we studied. But overall, the positive note of what we saw is that there are SARS-CoV-2 specific antibodies in human milk, and these antibodies are capable of neutralizing the virus. Interestingly, we also then looked at if there were correlations to the level of the concentration level of antibody present and its ability to neutralize, and this wasn't the case. We saw in unpasteurized milk this wasn't the case, but also in the two pasteurization methods, which we looked into, this didn't have an effect for the high pressure pasteurization method. However, it did have an effect with the traditional Holder pasteurization method, which concluded us to believe that the heat treatment itself actually causes a loss of functionality of these antibodies, but does not affect the level of antibodies present. So then it's not just the level that's present, but if they still maintain functionality, this is really important. So this would lead us to believe that for translational methods, if we wanted to use this milk to treat preterm infants, then alternative pasteurization methods would be better versus Holder pasteurization. And then also regarding the clonality studies that we did within these subjects, we saw that there were highly specific clones that were SARS-CoV-2 specific, which you can kind of see in the middle panel. The orange peak is our SARS-CoV-2 specific clone. And if you overlay that with the blue, which is our total clonal profile in milk, this is a relatively low concentration clone. Relative to other ones that are there that are not SARS-CoV-2 specific. But that doesn't necessarily make a problem for us, because if you have a very specific antibody, then you don't need a lot of it for it to do its function correctly. And that's what we know from other biological studies as well. And what we saw, though, is that like the ELISA-based methods, what we saw from mass spectrometry as well regarding the clones, is that pasteurization, regardless of the method, did not affect the total concentration that we observed, although these concentrations were lower than the unpasteurized milk samples, but it was not significant. And in our COVID extended study, what we really wanted to see was if we follow these moms for a long-term time, do we still find back these protective antibodies? And what we do see is that these antibodies are present for up to 5 months after the onset of symptoms. And in the top figure, you can see with all the different colored lines that every individual has a unique response. So some women had decreasing IgA concentrations, some increasing, and some stayed the same. But if you took the overall mean, which is the bottom line figure, it does seem that these SARS-CoV-2 specific IgAs gradually decrease over time. But regarding the clones, we do see, again, that these clones are highly stable. So the red square shows Pearson correlations of one individual donor over 3 time points. And there we see back the same clones repeatedly over and over again. So while the concentration goes down, the clones that are specific to SARS-CoV-2 stay present and aren't changing. And then what we did was actually an even longer follow-up from these individuals, where we followed them out to 10 months post-infection. And we saw that these antibodies were still present out at 10 months as well. So this is a really positive thing. It means that there is a long-term protection with these antibodies in human milk. So if you were still feeding your infant out to 10 months, they would have the same protection as well. And then I indicated that we were interested in these milk conversion rates. And that's because, again, we want to know if this milk from these infected women could be used in donation to treat vulnerable populations. So our overall takeaway from this was that of the infected women in the Netherlands that we studied, there was a 23% conversion rate. So this would be hopeful that we would be able to have some protection in our milk donations to the milk bank across the country. And then we followed this all up with our vaccination studies, in which we had pre-vaccine samples and then samples 15 days post dose 1 and dose 2, and out to 70 days after the first dose as well. And we also, so we studied all 4 vaccine types, the Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and Janssen. And our main takeaways from these studies were that IgA in human milk has this biphasic response, but this response was really accelerated after the second dose of vaccination. And that these mRNA-based vaccines led to milk conversion, so they had levels of SARS-CoV-2 specific IgAs above the lower limit of detection of our assays, and resulted in overall higher levels relative to the vector-based vaccines. And interestingly, only the Moderna vaccine had detectable SARS-CoV-2 IgAs out at 70 days. And then we also saw, just on a general population trend, that these mRNA-based vaccines resulted in more than 95% of our study population having SARS-CoV-2 specific IgAs in milk, whereas for the vector-based vaccines, this was less than 50% of the study population. So overall, this really concludes to us these mRNA-based vaccines for pregnant and lactating women are the better choice. And we also studied the clonal response from these vaccination studies, although there the data is still preliminary. And I won't go into detail for time's sake, but what we saw were 4 general trends regarding clonal evolution in human milk relative to vaccination. And then it was important to us to also say, we've studied now infected women and vaccinated women. Is there really a difference regarding antibodies in human milk from these 2 different groups of women? And what we see is no, there's no difference in the antibody levels for SARS-CoV-2 specific IgAs present in human milk, whether you've been infected or had a vaccination, at least up to the 70-day time point, which is our cutoff for vaccination. We haven't studied beyond that. And that maybe if you had an infection prior to vaccination, you might have a little bit more protection overall than if you had one or the other, but this was not statistically significant. So overall, we had really nice takeaways from our total studies, in that human milk does contain antibodies against SARS-CoV-2 from infected mothers, and this is present up to 10 months following an infection. The prevalence of these antibodies in the Dutch population was around 30%, and that these mRNA-based vaccines result in clear milk conversion and high antibody titers after the second dose. And altogether then, this really concludes to us that these mRNA-based vaccines are the way to go for lactating women, but even if you've had an infection, regardless, you would provide passive immunity to the infant through breastfeeding. And that is my presentation.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for sharing these fascinating results. And just a friendly reminder for our online audience, please continue to submit your questions through the Q&A session in Zoom, and we will be happy sharing them in the Q&A session. I'm happy to introduce Ms. Khadeejah Yousef from University of Jordan to share with us her next presentation.
هنا هي يعني زي باور هي اوكي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله يسعد مساكم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد صحبه وسلم. My name is Khadeejah Aldasoqi. I am a senior teacher at the Department of Maternal and Newborn Health at the School of Nursing, University of Jordan. I was concerned about the factors that mothers and the problems, challenges mothers face during their early times and early periods of the way they deal with the topic of breastfeeding. Breastfeeding is a complex process. Some people think that it is something intuitive and something simple process, that any woman or any mother is capable and ready to do this job. Unfortunately, this is not the case, given the right or the fact that many women are facing many challenges in initiating and continuing providing their own babies with this valuable and highly nutritious milk. So I did this research with Dr. Rima Safadi, Dr. Iman Badran, Dr. Asma Basha, Dr. British doctor from England, Susan Jordan, and Dr. Muayyad Ahmad. We were trying to measure the rates of exclusive rates of initiation of breastfeeding and the rates and rates of compliance or success of providing the babies with the exclusive breastfeeding versus mixed or not exclusive, like mother's milk or breast milk and bottle milk or bottle feeding, and none or only bottle breastfeeding, which is the failure of any kind of breastfeeding. So it was important to us to have this specific clarifications of the concept breastfeeding. So we rely on the definition of breastfeeding out of the WHO. So exclusive breastfeeding is defined as the following, which is providing the newborn or the neonate with only mother's milk. Partial breastfeeding, it is the mother's milk and the bottle milk. Bottle feeding, it is the absence of mother's milk. Okay, so we sought to investigate the rates of initiation of breastfeeding among first-time mothers. And if you ask me why first-time mothers, because of the factor that any mother who has babies or who have had breastfed previous baby will have more experience with breastfeeding. So we anticipate that breastfeeding or exclusive breastfeeding would be harder for mothers who have this experience for the first time. The strength of this study that we investigated the rates of breastfeeding during the first 24 hours at the hospitals, and we did telephone structured interviews with those mothers. Okay, we did telephone structured interviews with those mothers. with those mothers after 6 months of birth and after 6 weeks, sorry, and after 6 months. Yeah, the inclusion criteria were mothers, healthy mothers, for a term babies. So we did not include mothers with any newborn with like cleft lip or any compromised health condition. Okay, and as I highlighted before, this research consisted of 4 tools. The first one was the medical records tool. We, for each first-time mother, we collected data from her medical records about her obstetric history, her like gravida, bara, any antepartum complications, yeah, the history of the current labor, the use of any medications during birth, because those medications like epidural analgesia, like active management, induction of birth, were cited by evidence-based to have negative influence on mothers' ability, especially first-time mothers' ability to provide their babies with exclusive breastfeeding. Then the research team conducted face-to-face interviews with each single mother using a structured questionnaire during the first 24 hours of birth at the postpartum ward. Okay? Then, during this face-to-face interview, they collected demographic data about the mother, and especially we had asked them about whether they had received any education programs about how to initiate breastfeeding, what the parameters of exclusive breastfeeding, how to handle any problems or not. And we asked them about their breastfeeding practice, specifically the timing. We asked them specifically what was the time they put the baby for the first time on the breast. Yeah? That data collection tool number 3 and number 4 were telephone interviews using a structured questionnaire over the first 6 weeks and then after the first 6 months after birth. These tools gave us a lot of data about, first of all, what the type of nutrition they give the baby. I mean, it was not like, are you giving your baby exclusive breastfeeding? No. It has specific questions to specify so that the research team could specify intensively and accurately the typing of breastfeeding, whether it is exclusive, is it partial, or it is not, it is just a bottle feeding. Okay? So, I'm afraid that I couldn't handle the tables from the, I think there's a problem. No. Okay. I think I need to use this because I can't see it. Yes. Maybe I need the microphone. Yeah. So in these tables, I would like to introduce you to the findings that we have. No. Let's have a look at the rate, at the socio-demographic data of our sample. The mean age for the mothers, the age ranged from 18 years to 43 years. The mean age was about, the middle 20s. About 60% of mothers and spouses had completed more than 12 years of education. Yeah? This one is very interesting. 60% of the first-time mother in this study actually was conducted among patients or women taking health care during labor in the Jordan University Hospital and the private hospital, the Islamic Hospital. The sample size was about 200 mothers. it's okay. No, don't worry. Okay? All right. So 60% of those first-time mothers were employed, and within the first 24 hours of birth, almost all mothers had no postpartum complications. Okay? Let's talk about the rates of breastfeeding. The rates of breastfeeding initiation during the first 4 hours of birth, only 13%, around 13% of mothers initiated breastfeeding. About 56% did that within the first 12 hours of birth, and 90% of those mothers did that during the first 24 hours. The rate of exclusive breastfeeding was 25% at 6 weeks after birth, and only 2% at 6 months after birth. Okay? This one is very interesting, actually. So we have studied the relationship or the correlation between the maternal factors and neonatal factors and these findings. Okay? We have found that most older and employed mothers were more successful to initiate the breastfeeding at hospitals and to have better chances or rates of exclusive breastfeeding at 6 months, 6 weeks, and 6 months. Okay? The mode of birth, of course, which is normal delivery or vaginal delivery versus cesarean delivery. So, for example, mothers who had their babies normal delivery were more successful to have better scores at initiation and continuation of exclusive breastfeeding. Mothers who received information about breastfeeding during pregnancy and information about breastfeeding after birth were more successful in providing initiation and continuation of breastfeeding. And these findings have great implications for the role of nurses and doctors for first-time mothers and, of course, any mother. Okay, 100% of our sample for vaginal delivery had episiotomies. About 94% of mothers had active management with oxytocin and ergometrin after birth, whether they had normal delivery or cesarean birth. And there was a correlation between the dose of ergometrin and exclusive breastfeeding failure at 6 weeks after birth. We know we are talking about first-time mothers. Was there a need to give them higher doses of ergometrin? This might be an implication for further research of obstetric intervention during birth for mothers, okay, especially for those who are at low risk. Because I'm running out of time, this is maybe the last one. Okay, mothers' report indicated that they stopped breastfeeding after birth because they complained from problems related to cracked nipple and mastitis or nipple pain. They reported that inadequate milk or being tired from breastfeeding, returning to work after the maternity leave, and infants' refusal to breastfeeding. Infant weight gain was not was suboptimal. Yeah, I need, please, the last one. The last one, please. Thank you. Nipple biting and infant allergic response to breast milk. Those are the most common reported reasons by mothers at 6 weeks and 6 months of discontinuing of breastfeeding. And excuse me for the length presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Khadeejah, for such an interesting study and results. It's a pleasure now to invite Dr. Nahla Al-Bayyari from Al-Huson University College to present us with the next presentation.
Good evening, everybody. And it's my... Don't worry, I know the limit, okay? Thank you, Afnan, Dr. Afnan, for the nice introduction. And It's my pleasure to present my study, which is part of a huge project conducted in the north of Jordan, including the under 5 children. Okay. The study title, Factors Associated with the Breastfeeding Indicators Among a Cohort of Infants and Toddlers in the North of Jordan. I'm going to give a brief introduction about my topic. As we know, breastfeeding, lowering the risk of childhood obesity and helping maintaining suitable and stable growth rates for infants. The benefits of breastfeeding, especially the exclusively breastfeeding in the first 6 months, promoting the proper cognitive developments and the physical growth and the metabolic regulation and proper immunity of the infants during the first 6 months. Because of these benefits, the WHO and the American Association of Pediatrics and the international agencies recommended to exclusively breastfeed infants for the first 6 months of age and to continue breastfeeding, okay, during the 2 years of the child age. Previous studies estimated the rate of exclusive breastfeeding in Jordan to range between 21 and 77%, but unfortunately this rate declined in the last 20 years. Therefore, okay, our study was designed to evaluate the factors associated with breastfeeding indicators among infants and toddlers. The design of the study was cross-sectional, and we recruited 300 children aged from 0 to 36 months. They were randomly selected from maternal and child health care centers in the north of Jordan, but we exclude children older than 36 months or who suffer from any congenital abnormalities and who attended non-governmental MCH centers. The data collection tool was a structured, valid, and reliable questionnaires. We used this type of questionnaire to collect the knowledge, attitudes, and practices of the study subject's mother, the socio-demographic data, the medical and the health, and the dietary characteristics, all of these data collected using the structured questionnaire. The independent variables of this study was gender, area of residence, income, maternal employment, birth weight, and gestational age at delivery. While the independent variables included in this study were the breastfeeding indicators, including exclusive breastfeeding, the age-appropriate breastfeeding, predominant breastfeeding, ever breastfeeding, continued breastfeeding at 1 year, and breastfeeding duration. We analyzed the data using the chi-square test, the independent sample t-test, and the multivariate binary logistic regression using SPSS version 22. Regarding the results of this study, the first table showed the demographic and anthropometric characteristics of the study sample. I will select some of these variables and the characteristics. For example, 49% of the study sample were male, okay, and sorry, this is hard a little bit, yeah, and 51 were females, 67% reside in urban areas, and 74% of the study sample had low income, below 500 GD per month. and around 89% of the study sample where the mothers are unemployed. Regarding the low birth weight, okay, 90% of the study sample, they had a normal birth or they had a birth weight more than 2.5 kilograms. And regarding the BMI, around 36% of the study sample, they were overweight or obese, and only 30% of the study sample breastfed. This table shows the association of breastfeeding indicators with gender and area of residence. As we see, regarding the gender, we did not find any significant difference between male and female children regarding the association with breastfeeding indicators, but we can see a significant difference regarding the area of residence, where urban children have higher percentage of being exclusively breastfed comparing to rural children, and also they had higher percentage of being predominantly breastfed and a higher percentage of being never breastfed, as well as they have a higher percentage of being age appropriate breastfeeding, and their mothers also reported a longer duration of suitable breastfeeding comparing to rural children. This table shows the association with the breastfeeding indicators regarding the family monthly income and the maternal employment. Regarding the family income, we classified the income below 500 GD and more than 500 GD, as you see, and we only detect a significant difference according to income, where the higher income children had higher percentage of never breastfed comparing to lower income. While there is a significant difference regarding the employed and non-employed mothers, where children for unemployed mothers have a higher percentage of being ever breastfed. The logistic regression analysis showed that rural and the low birth weight infants below 2.5 kilogram were less likely to being ever breastfed, and also low birth weight infants were less likely of being age appropriate breastfed. Although the urban children and the employed mothers' children had a higher or were more likely, being age-appropriate breastfeeding. In conclusion, we can say that the North Jordan breastfeeding practices were mostly associated with the child's age, the birth weight, and the area of residence, the mother's employment, and the family income. This study offered the results intimate look at the feeding practices and beliefs of Jordanian mothers, as well as it is very useful for practitioners and the policymakers to encourage better breastfeeding, and the sample results provide better practices than many other countries in the Eastern Mediterranean region, but unfortunately Jordan is still behind the recommendations set by the WHO. We recommend from this study that the feeding practices could be influenced by the beliefs of the mother, but also by the relatives of the mother, and this should be furtherly investigated and considered when designing programs to increase the positive breastfeeding behaviors. Second, the average reported best time for weaning a child was around 10 months. But actually, okay, we found that the average weaning time, okay, around 6 to 7 months, which indicates the need not only for the educational programs to emphasize the breastfeeding, but also we need more interventions to help mothers continue breastfeeding after 6 months. Also, we need to increase the nursery homes, increase the maternity leave at least up to 90 days, and give the option of the employed mothers to work online or part-time. Finally, breastfeeding programs, according to our study, is highly recommended for rural, high-income, and working mothers having low birth weight infants. We would like to declare that we don't have any conflict of interest as authors, and I would like to acknowledge all the mothers' children participating in this study, and all the MCH centers, coordinators, and the midwives, nurses who help us, okay, to collect the data. And personally, I would like to thank my co-authors, Dr. Marah Helat and Rihanna Eaton from the University of Michigan. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nahla, for such an interesting study and results. For our next presentation, we will have a recorded video from Mr. Jarallah Al-Tbali from
I am Dr. Jarallah Al-Tbali from Yemen. My topic is about the prevalence of exclusive breastfeeding practices and barriers among.
And for any questions, we encourage you to have those questions, and we can share it with him and get back to you with the answers as soon as we can. So, please, thank you.
Hello everybody, I am Dr. Jarallah Al-Tbali from Yemen. My topic is about the prevalence of exclusive breastfeeding practices and barriers among mothers of babies less than 6 months in Rida District, Amran Governorate, Yemen, 2019. Introduction. Exclusive breastfeeding is giving no food for babies less than 6 months except medicine, minerals, vitamins, and ORS. Is an important public health strategy for reducing morbidity and mortality for child and mother. The global nutrition target is to increase the rate from 38 to 50 by 2025. The global exclusive breastfeeding rate was 38% between 2007 and 2014. In Yemen, the rate was 10% according to Yemen National Health Demographic Survey 2013. Objectives: to assess the prevalence of exclusive breastfeeding in Rida District, Amran Governorate 2019, and to assess the knowledge, attitude, practices of mother about exclusive breastfeeding, to identify the barriers of exclusive breastfeeding, recommendation and intervention to improve practices of breastfeeding. Mother methodology. Health facilities based cross-sectional study was done in Rida District, Amran Governorate, in 3 main health facilities in the district: Rida Hospital, Hamida, and Daifan Health Centers between October to December 2019. Population of study were mother of babies less than 6 months who attend the vaccination unit in these health facilities. Sample size according to population proportion formula according to the following assumption: prevalence 50%, confidence interval 95%, 10% for non-response mothers, power 80%, final sample size was 380. Data collection, pre-designed questionnaire was used. Data entered, coded, and analyzed by ABInfo version 7.2. ANOVA anti-test bivariate and logistic regression was used to assess the association p-value equal or less than 0.05, statistically significant for knowledge and practices, 1 or 0 for correct or incorrect answer, for attitude Likert scale was used. The overall score of knowledge, attitude, practices for less than 60%, good from 60 to less than 80%, excellent, equal or more than 80%. Result. The prevalence of exclusive breastfeeding in Riyadh district, according to the study, 24%. More knowledge, 49%. Good attitude and practices, 63% respectively. Regarding the association between mother knowledge, attitude, practice, and demographic characteristics, we found significant association between the overall mother knowledge and the illiterate education of mother with the value 0.03. Also with male sex babies with the value of 0.03. And the overall score of attitude of mother was significantly associated with high income families, 0.003. And the overall mother practices score was statistically significant with BBA 3 to less than 6 months of life, a value of 0.05. Most mothers said not correct reason or refused stopping of exclusive breastfeeding due to following reasons: baby hungry or not enough milk, sucking problem of in the of baby, mother had work outside home, or mother had sickness or on medication, presence of bottle, lack energy or desire of mother. And this pod entered with exclusive breastfeeding. The most of them is baby formula, 42%, and which is one of the most barriers. Bivariate analysis of between maternal characteristics and barriers, we found the association with baby age 3 to less than 6 months of life, baby with B value of 0.001, and with no enough milk with B value of 0.01, and with no mother sickness or medication with B value of 0.00, with B value of 4, and with no mothers with no sucking problems of baby with B value of 0.01, and with mother work outside home of 0.01. By logistic regression to confirm the association between significant factors with exclusive breastfeeding, we found thinking potency sensitivity was statistically significant with B value or equal or less than 0.001, and the with frequency of breastfeeding per day, which is less than 8 times per day with B value equal or less than 0.001. Recommendation: promote health education for mother to increase their knowledge about exclusive breastfeeding, especially for babies from 3 to less than 6 months of life. Improving mother practices through advising them to extend breastfeeding time and stopping introducing complementary food due to up to 6 months of life, and keeping breastfeeding their babies more than 8 times per day. Correct false perception and specific intervention to stop early discontinuation of exclusive breastfeeding. Thankful this for Y-FETP program, Dr. Labiba An'am, Y-FETP senior epidemiologist, and for Jordan Nutrition Invitation Lab first national scientific symposium. Thank you very much. Hello.
Last but not least, please join me in welcoming Ms. Aseel Melhem from the University of Jordan, presenting to us today the maternal weight status on its relationship with pregnancy of complication.
Hello, everybody. Okay, I'm going to talk about maternal weight status and its relationship with complication during the third trimester. Let's take briefly in background. Gestational weight status increased the incidence of maternal complications during pregnancy. In Jordan and until 2009, the prevalence of obesity was around 40% among Jordanian women aged between 15 and 49. And this has increased up to 48% in 2020. In pregnancy, high body mass index is associated with increased likelihood of complications during the third trimester of pregnancy. Excessive gestational weight gain has significant public health implications due to the increased risk of birth complication and cesarean birth. This study aimed at examining the association of pre-pregnancy body mass index and gestational weight gain with the pregnancy complications. We will highlight it on anemia, gestational diabetes mellitus, gestational hypertension, and pre-eclampsia during the third trimester, of course. Research method, it's a descriptive cross-sectional and correlation design. We use a non-probability quota sampling technique. So we have collected the data until required number were reached. Okay, inclusion criteria where gestational age more than 26 weeks, age between 18 and 35, didn't suffer from any chronic disease before pregnancy, body mass index more than 18.5. So we exclude the underweight. Okay, documentation of body weight before or at 12 weeks, singleton pregnancy, and didn't have more than 5 live births before this pregnancy. Sample size was 1,052 pregnant women during her third trimester. Okay, data collection method, face-to-face interview, and we back to the medical record. Okay, the participants were classified into 3 categories based on their pre-pregnancy body mass index. As we see, it's normal weight, overweight, and obese. And accordingly, we categorized an inadequate, adequate, and excessive weight gain. Okay, we find that around 56% were undergraduate, 61% non-employed, 9% were smoked, 9% started prenatal care after the first trimester, and around a half of our sample have a history of cesarean birth. Okay, and 83 women gained an excessive weight during pregnancy. Okay. By doing a Spearman correlation analysis, we find a significant relationship between the gestational diabetes mellitus and pre-pregnancy body mass index. Also, we have a significant relationship between the gestational hypertension and pre-pregnancy body mass index. Okay, here we can see that we found a relationship, significant relationship between inadequate gestational weight gain and the gestational diabetes mellitus. Also, we have a relationship with excessive gestational weight gain with an anemia. Okay. Here, the association between complications during pregnancy and the mother's characteristics. So we have a relationship between anemia and smoking. Also, we have a relationship between gestational diabetes mellitus and education. Moreover, the gestational hypertension is significant. There is a significant relationship between the gestational hypertension and the educational level. Same with the cesarean birth number. Okay, we conclude that health during pregnancy is affected by several factors. Two of these factors are the pre-pregnancy body mass index and the amount of weight gain during pregnancy. Increased pre-pregnancy body mass index is associated with increased rate of gestational diabetes mellitus and gestational hypertension during pregnancy. There is a significant increase in rates of anemia and gestational diabetes mellitus during pregnancy in women with body mass index over than 25. Maternal education, smoking history, and previous cesarean births are associated with pregnancy complications. One preventable measure is a close observation of maternal weight to maintain the recommended pre-pregnancy body mass index and weight gain during pregnancy. And thank you all. I want to say thank you especially to my supervisor, Dr. Arima Al-Safadi. Thank you, Dr. Arima.
Thank you, Aseel, and thank you all for such great presentations. We can now open the floor for Q&A. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll have a microphone for you. Can we have a, yes please. Can we have a microphone for Dr. Iman and then we'll have Dr. Nisreen.
My name is Iman Badran and there is one question targeted Dr. Khadeejah and Dr. Nahla at the same time. How, Dr. Khadeejah, explain the exclusive breastfeeding rate 2% at 6 months, while in your study, Dr. Nahla, it was 30%?
If you would like me to proceed, I will. Okay? Okay.
Thank you for your question, Dr. Badran. Because data collection for our research was very precise. Was very precise, and it took a long time during data collection. The questions were not like, have you given your baby exclusive breastfeeding? No. We had plenty of items in tables, and we asked mothers precisely and accurately many questions, like in the last 6 months, have you given your baby 1, 2, 3 juice, tea, anything you can imagine. And I can share with you the tables or the data collection tool. So I mean, I'm sure that we can do maybe the same, many research, but the rigor or the preciseness of the data collection method will be more accurate if you ask specific and more thorough questions, not just, for example, to assess, for example, anything like, are you okay today? You can say no or yes, but if I have like tools, I can find whether you are like depressed or not. You know what I mean? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, for me, thank you, Dr. Iman. First of all, I took my data from the north of Jordan, from MCH centers. So my target group may be different from the study of Dr. Khadeejah, okay? Also the 30% is including ever breastfed, if they giving breastfeeding and bottle feeding together. Just we asked if the mother breastfed. So among the 300 participants, okay, 30% of them, they are breastfed. But if they are exclusively breastfed or no, they are not exclusively breastfed. This is why the rate is higher. Is it enough? Okay, thank you.
Thank you both for your answers. If we can get the microphone to Dr. Nisreen, she had a question.
Thank you. I'm Nisreen Vitar from the Community Health and Nutrition Project. Thank you all for your great presentations. And I have one question to Dr. Aseel. Dr. Aseel, you mentioned that there's a relation between the education and the gestational diabetes and gestational hypertension. Do you have any explanation for that?
Yes. Here, the education. واضح? Okay. Here, the education level are used categorized, so numbering from 1 to 5. So we analyze the data between as a number. So when the education is higher, so the gestational DM and gestational hypertension will be lower because the data give me a negative value. So it's the justification. Okay, clear? Yeah, exactly, yes. Her awareness is more, so they know what eat and what need to eat, especially.
Thank you.
Thank you,
So
Dr.
as she's more educated, she cares more about herself,
Yes.
and she can protect herself toward diabetes mellitus or hypertension. Yeah,
Exactly.
thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you. Can we get the microphone to Dr. Shivani Ghosh? Here, in the front, first table. Thank you.
Thank you. And my question is actually for Kelly. Kelly, really phenomenal presentation, and I'm sorry you're not here with us, but we can see you. And I think the question I have is, it's a very fascinating set of results, particularly when we are sort of still struggling with COVID, and particularly on sort of how to deal with COVID in pregnancy. So what are the next steps for the kind of research you're doing, and or are you all, the researchers that you worked with, are at a point where recommendations could be made on messaging to pregnant women about breastfeeding as a protective against COVID?
Yes, so actually here in the Netherlands, it is recommended for lactating women to be vaccinated. And a lot of it is also because of what we see in these studies. We see that it's safe. We see that there's passive immunity from mother to infant via breastfeeding. So then you're also able to provide protection to these infants which cannot yet receive vaccinations, because we don't know that it's there's no recommendations for infants at these ages yet. And then also we know that if these women are vaccinated, they pass these antibodies through their milk. And then from a milk banking perspective, this is also beneficial, because then we know that that milk could be used to protect like preterm infants, for instance, which have no other way of getting protection against this virus.
Thank you. Can I ask one more? Yeah, sorry.
You'll have the last question, Dr.
Okay.
Shivani, because we have 4 minutes left.
All right. So I think, Kelly, just to follow up, I also saw on one of your slides that it was protective against other respiratory viruses. Did I get that right?
Yes. So actually, that was I just put that in there because that's a newer publication from the group of Hans van Houthuber. I actually did not participate in those studies, but they looked at RSV and influenza during, I think in 2021, during that influenza period and RSV period, and saw that women who had been infected or had vaccination against SARS-CoV-2 actually had protective effects against RSV and influenza as well. And to an extent, this also makes sense because we know, especially for vaccinations, against SARS-CoV-2, you have protection against other coronaviruses as well. But what the underlying mechanisms are behind RSV and influenza, I'm unsure of, but those results were just published. I don't remember the journal that it was published in, because it really just came out like a few weeks ago.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thank you, because it really highlights the importance of breast milk, not only from a perspective, we've been talking in the case of Jordan from a perspective of supporting women with respect to their nutritional status, but also the child. But it seems like there are some added benefits for supporting and promoting breastfeeding in women linked to not communicable diseases, in this case, COVID and other respiratory diseases. So thanks, Kelly, so much. This really was fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your. Go ahead.
Okay, I had a little bit of question to Aseel. Excuse me, Aseel. When you introduced the inclusion criteria, you said the mother should have not more than 5 births, okay? Yes. And the age starts from 18 years and should be pregnant more than 26 weeks of gestation, yeah? Did you find any mother with age 18 and she had more than 3 children? Just for, I want to know if you find in your data that 18 years old, okay, a mother 18 years old, and she had more than 5 children?
No, I don't have. Okay. I collect my data by myself, okay, so I don't find, but I find an 18 woman with 2 children. But more than 5 or more than 3, no, I don't find.
Okay, where you collected your data from? Where?
From two teaching hospital, University of Jordan Hospital and King Abdullah University Hospital.
Okay, so you take data from the north of Jordan?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
I hate to cut this off, but for the sake of timing, we conclude this session, and thank you all for your presentation and for the engaged discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Afnan, for such an outstanding moderation. We as well thank your distinguished guests and speakers. Special gratitude to Kelly and